Hi, so today I'm going to do a workshop about human trafficking in Colorado. Okay, so a definition about human trafficking. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is a severe form of exploiting of another person, which involves force, fraud, or coercion for labor or commercial sexual purposes. Human trafficking involves sex acts or labor or services that are induced through force, fraud, or coercion. It's a little repetitive, but pretty much human trafficking is exploiting of another human, and it has to involve force, fraud, or coercion. But if the victim is a minor under 18 years old in a sex trafficking situation, there does not have to be any force, fraud, or coercion for it to be considered or classified human trafficking. Okay, so a little bit more about sex trafficking. Pretty much is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, promotion, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by the same force, fraud, or coercion. That's very important because you need to prove that. You need to prove force, fraud, or coercion in order for the person who is doing the trafficking to be prosecuted for what they're doing. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about what human trafficking, sex trafficking is. But first, let's talk a little bit about labor trafficking, which is different from sex trafficking. So labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of the same thing, force, fraud, or coercion, for the purpose of pretty much to get involuntary servitude, debt bondage, or slavery. Pretty much what this is somebody coming up to you and telling you that, let's see, I'm trying to think of a good example for you to understand what labor trafficking is. Pretty much, if somebody were to, let's say, you owed somebody a debt or you owed somebody money and they told you that you had to work for them for this much for you to pay the debt off. So some people might do that, but they will keep them there longer than they said. They won't pay them. They'll work really long hours, things like that. Another example that I wanted to use is some nail shops, nail salons. There has been some examples of the nail tech being there and staying there the whole day, working the whole day, and not getting paid what they deserve, pretty much for the fear of being undocumented, not having a work permit, not being able to work in the United States legally, I guess. So they take advantage of that and they tell them that they have to work all day and they don't get paid. That's labor trafficking. So and there's something else that I want to talk about is that it can happen to anyone and it happens all over the world. And here in Colorado, in the United States. So unfortunately, humans make the most money because you can reuse humans, unlike drugs. So pretty much it's an endless profit for the trafficker. So another main thing is that human trafficking exists because there is a demand for cheap labor, services, and commercial sex. If there wasn't the need for it, then it wouldn't exist. There is an overall demand when people are willing to buy commercial sex. So there's a market that is profitable for the trafficker. Let me say that again. So there is an overall demand for people who are willing to buy that, which makes a really profitable market for the trafficker. So they're willing to sexually exploit children and adults. How do you stop this? Do not buy sex or participate in the commercial sex industry. So, pretty shocking. Not that shocking to me, but human trafficking is a $32 billion a year industry, which means that there's 21 to 36 million people that are enslaved in forced or bonded labor, child labor, sexual servitude, involuntary servitude at any given time. 98% of the victims are women and children. About 80% of trafficking involves sexual exploitation. So gender equality and culture believes that a woman can be brought and sold into is the root cause of some sex trafficking. Um, so this is the second largest criminal industry in the world. So another sad thing is that only about 5% of trafficking cases are reported because a lot of people do not know that that is happening to them. Not a lot of people are not going to come up to you and tell you, "Hey, I am a victim of human trafficking, sex trafficking." So some statistics on human trafficking. Of the case reported in 2017, 84 were female, 27 were male, and 73 were adults. 28 were minors of those cases that were reported. So some inaccurate data is that a lot of people think that human trafficking happens like far away in another country, but it doesn't. It happens here and everywhere. So I wanted to put some resources on here. Just what you can do. I also have some other numbers further into the PowerPoint. So there's a really good place, really good Denver-based places that are helping people who are victims of human trafficking. One of them is COBA, which is a very good program as well as laboratory to combat human trafficking. So something that makes Colorado special, not special, but it helps the traffickers, is that Colorado is a transit state, which means that I-25 and I-70 connect Colorado from the coast to the borders to everywhere. It's in the middle of the country, which makes Colorado a destination state, unfortunately. That means that people can move quickly. So the people aren't found. They can move from place to place. They can be in Colorado today and go to California because of the access to the highways. Mm, we are the largest city in a 600-mile radius. That makes it more appealing. Um, so who are the people that are most vulnerable to human trafficking? So that includes undocumented individuals, people involved in the commercial sex industry, and minors who are residing with their legal guardian, or people who are experiencing homelessness. Okay, so I also want to talk a little bit about some intersections between human trafficking and domestic violence. So, both of them deprive the victim of their most basic human rights. Um, a lot of them do not self-identify as victims and are unaware of what they can do in regards to legal prosecutions. Um, they both use the same range of tactics to manipulate and control their victim, so they're a bit similar. Um, so I also have a few pictures that explain a little bit more about human trafficking. So um, these are some, but I also have some other interesting statistics. So a majority of human trafficking, as you can see, 92% are female, 8% are male. And the age range, 12% are 35 and older, 23% are between 25 to 34, 38% are 18 to 24 years old, and unfortunately 27% are 17 and younger. So, um, pretty much Human trafficking does not discriminate against anybody. It can happen to anybody and everybody. So we need to bring some awareness to it so that we can help people. So I really like this power and control wheel. Pretty much tells you how people are lured into sex trafficking or labor trafficking. So let's start in coercion and threats. Threatens to do physical harm, threatens to harm family, threatens to shame victim to community, threatens to report to police, immigration. That can go for either or. Somebody can do threats and to report you to immigration, so they are labor trafficked, work long hours, don't get paid, work in crappy conditions, or they can say you need to do go in. They can sex traffic them, saying that they have to do this, or they're going to hurt their family, or that they're going to tell the community that they're this and that, and intimidation. The same thing. They can harm to or kills others to show the force, to show that they are willing to do whatever it takes. They can display or use weapons for either or. They can destroy property. They can say, I'll harm your children if you don't do this or if you don't do that. Goes for both. They can lie about police involvement in the trafficking situation. They can say, oh, well, nobody's going to help you. You have to do. They can make them, they can sex traffic them, say that the police is involved, that nobody's going to help them, or labor trafficking, saying that they're paying off the cops, that they're not going to do anything about it. So emotional abuse can happen for either or, either sex trafficking or labor trafficking. They can humiliate them in front of others, call them names, play mind games. They can make them feel guilty or blame them for the situation. A lot of um, an example is of sex trafficking. There's a lot of cases of young girls who meet a man who has a lot of money. They say that they can treat them good, especially young girls, especially if their home situation is not that great. They can use that, unfortunately, to their advantage and tell them that, oh, if you come with me, I'll give you this. They groom them to become a person who they can traffic. So they can tell them that, oh, well, I need to make money to pay this, to pay that. Like, come on, you need to help me, or force them to do it. Like, oh, well, I need money. They can make them believe that that's the only way, that there's no way out of it, pretty much. Make them play mind games, trick them into thinking that there's no other way to get out of it. Um, they can also create dependence by convincing victims that they are the only one that cares about them. So they can say that their family doesn't care for them because they don't provide the things that he's providing or she. Doesn't matter. They can happen to anybody. Another thing is isolation. Um, so isolation, it keeps them confined, keeps them in a room. Like once they gain their trust and they're with them, they can keeps them confined, accompanies them to public places so they don't tell people what's going on, creates distrust of police or others, says that they're going to do this, just threatens them, just pretty much just isolates them, makes victim move to multiple locations. So that's seen a lot with sex trafficking. Victims, they move them from place to place so they become disoriented, so they don't know where they are. So if they wanted to get help, they wouldn't know where to go to or who to ask for help. So they can move them from place to place, and that makes it harder for the police to find them if they're just moving from place to place. They don't know anybody, they're isolated, they're not going to run into somebody they know. They're just groomed to, they just groom them to stay there, and doesn't just they lose some of the victims lose hope because they're just so disoriented, they don't know where they are. They rotate the victims so they can just go from back and forth again, trying to disorient them also so people won't see them all the time or grow suspicious of what's going on. Or also doesn't allow the victim to learn English. So labor trafficking or sex trafficking, if they don't speak English, they don't teach them to speak English because they can't socialize with others. Well, that's not true, but largely English spoken here in Denver, so not they don't let them speak English. Denies access to children, family, and friends, so pretty much just keeps them isolated. So minimizing, denying, and blaming the victim. So pretty much makes light of the abuse or situation, like, oh, for sex trafficking, oh, you're making good money, you could be doing something else and you won't make as much money. Or like, it's not our labor trafficking, oh, it's not that bad, the hours aren't long, you couldn't get anything else, you're not authorized to work in the United States, the best that you can get. Just some examples. Or deny that there's anything illegal occurring. So sex trafficking may think that, they're like, you're helping me, um, this is how it's gonna be, this is how we can make money for us to live a good life. Or they can place blame on the victim, like, well, you don't know, you can't do anything else, you can't work, this is like what you made happen, like just blaming the victim for the situation that they're in. Or also sexual abuse. So that sex trafficking, they force the victim to have sex with multiple people in a day, uses rape as a weapon and means of control, uh, treats victim like an object and is used for monetary gain, normalizes sexual violence and selling sex. So pretty much says that, normalizes it, makes it like it's that everybody does it. So using privilege, treats victim like a servant. So if they're the boss, say in a labor trafficking situation, they're like, you have to do this because you're working for me, all this stuff. Defines gender roles to make subservient. So pretty much in the sex trafficking situation, if the pimp is a male, he can say that he's the male, so he makes all the rules. She has to do whatever he says. He uses certain victims to control other victims. So pretty much saying that they're gonna hurt. Say in a sex trafficking situation, if there's a couple girls and one of the girls is close with the other girl, says that if she doesn't do this, she's gonna hurt the other girl. Or hides or destroys important papers. So sex trafficking and labor trafficking, you can take license, passport, anything kind of, take it. So they feel like even more hopeless, like they can't go anywhere without that. Economic abuse creates debt bondage that can never be repaid. Like, say for sex trafficking, they're living in a house and is saying, well, you live in this house, you have to make money, you have to help me with the rent to pay the bills or something. Or labor trafficking or anything like a loan, like, oh, I needed some. If somebody asks them, a victim asks a perpetrator for money and they can use it against them, like, oh, you have to pay me back, so you have to work for me or you have to sell sex in order for you to make that debt to pay me my money back. Take some of all the money earned. That's another way they can abuse economic abuse. Like, they're making money through sex trafficking, they keep all the money to themselves and they don't give any to the victim. So, as well as forbids the victim to have access to their finances or bank account. So they have no access to money. So they feel even more hopeless that they can't get out of the situation. Um, Forbids victim to go to school or work. Pretty much the same thing as isolation. They can't go to work or they can't go to school. They're just trying to keep them in the mindset. They're just trying to control them. And coercion and threats. Threatens to do physical harm. They can physically abuse them. Um, Threatens to harm their family. Again, saying that if you don't do this, I'm going to go and kill your parents, hurt your children, hurt your family. And yeah, that's a little bit about a couple examples of first about sex trafficking and labor trafficking. How. So another thing is, what can you do? So you can try it again. I said there was going to be another side about this, so here it is. Try and seek help for anyone you believe to be involved in human trafficking. Call hotlines are available. I listed a few hotlines here that are 24 hours, and then the email as well if the person doesn't want to call, or if you're having questions, you can always do it. And then Street Hope, that's another organization here in Denver, their phone number and their email. So, here's a couple more visuals about sex trafficking. So, 27 million people are modern day slaves throughout the world today. So, um, the typical age of entry into sex slavery is 13 to 14 years old, and over 50% of the victims are children. 2 children are being sold every minute, which is heartbreaking. Um, again, there's a couple other um, visuals, and oops, let me go back to the last one. So yeah, so pretty much just wanted to do this to bring some awareness to human trafficking because it's not talked about a lot. So something also that I wanted to talk about is um is that um the more awareness we bring to this, the more we can help children and adults not be exploited. So thank you.